All right, we'll get cooking. I know this is being recorded, so for anybody who shows up late, they'll certainly be able to catch up with the recording on this and get up to speed. So, all right, hey, first of all, thank you everybody that took the time to join today and spend some time with us. I lost my, just like that, I lost my, there we go. We'll get through the technical difficulties, whatever they may be today. So hopefully you guys can see that okay. We'll get going here. Thank you for taking the time to join us. I know everybody's extremely busy and has a lot going on these days. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of fun. We'll pontificate on a few things around end user compute or digital workspace, I guess. All right, pretty simple agenda today. Just a quick intro. Where are we? Where are we going? As I tell my wife all the time, what would Bob do? We'll talk through a couple of examples and then maybe some next steps as we get out of here today and maybe some things that you guys want to think about moving forward. If you've been with Right Systems for a while, you've probably seen this slide umpteen times. Multiple practice areas. We are an engineering-focused organization or value-added reseller. We really strive to put the value into what it means to be a reseller for our customers. And so we have engineering practices in everything you see on the screen here. I happen to lead the digital workspace practice, but I have counterparts in each of the other practices that you see on the screen, and you've probably dealt with some of those folks. Where are we? I'm not going to read this for you. You guys can read as well as I do, but I thought I'd throw something up that I felt to be a little, I don't know, entertaining or amusing, I guess, while I went through a little bit of an intro. But for those of you that I don't know on the call, Bob Allred, I manage the digital workspace or the end user compute practice for Right Systems. I've been here for, I guess, almost 20 years. Prior to that, I spent about 7 years in healthcare. When I was in healthcare, Citrix came knocking at the door and somebody needed to be the guy, and I kind of raised my hand and said, well, that sounds interesting, I'll do that. And so I learned it and supported it, and I was there for a while, and then I elected to move on. I ended up at Right Systems, and I've been here ever since. So I showed up here as an engineer, spent about half my time at Right Systems as a primary delivery engineer doing projects and whatnot with customers. I guess about 10 years ago, we elected to kind of solidify what we call practices here at Right Systems. From there on, I've been leading the practice. Fortunately for me, I found a bunch of people that are incredibly talented and really, really good engineers. And so I have a great group of guys on the team that are out there working with our customers every day, delivering these technologies. So where are we? You know, I think if you look at that, we have seen the constant evolution of apps and desktops and the way we deliver those things over the years, right? You know, for those of you who are older than me, maybe that were here in the 80s and maybe the early 90s, you know, we went from what you would call a thin client today, gaining access to things in the data center, to everybody needs a PC on the desktop, to over the last 15 years or so, thinking about, hey, maybe we can go back to that thin client idea and put everything in the data center again, and now we want to put it in the cloud, but maybe there's a hybrid way to do it where some of the stuff's here and some of the stuff's there, and people are working all over the place today that they certainly weren't doing, you know, 15 or 20 or 30 years ago. So there's a lot going on in this space today. I think there's more going on in this space today than any time that I've been involved. So it's an interesting time, and we'll talk through a little bit of that today. Bear with me on my clicker here. I don't want to click too many times. There we go. So common considerations. This is going to seem a little duh, but I think it's at least good to put it on the screen, right? And whether you are in finance or healthcare or manufacturing, we're all dealing with some of the exact same challenges. Not the users are challenges, but you know, we're all dealing with something very similar, right? Users are they're moving quick these days, and they have a lot of demands, right? You know, we've been dealing with this local remote hybrid thing for a long time, but I think as we came in and out of COVID, it's become more pronounced, and the needs of these users has been ramped up. and the security for these users has been ramped up. If you go back to when I got in IT, I think if you had a firewall and you had an antivirus product, you were 2 thumbs up. We're secure, buddy. We're good. And any of you who have laptops or PCs know today, you have 19 agents on there making sure that you're good. And so it's a lot more of a complex world when it comes to security for these users, right? Regardless of where they are. Again, applications. Again, nothing new here. We're still installing local applications. Windows applications are not going anywhere. A lot of those applications are still client server. That's how we got into the world of delivering applications virtually to folks that were sitting at home or in another part of the world or in a branch office. So we could efficiently get those applications to those folks. Again, it's still there. More and more SaaS. I talk to customers every week who are moving maybe away from that client server. I need a virtualization tool like Citrix as an example, but maybe I don't need it as much because I'm moving more and more of these applications to SaaS-based applications, and they're kind of reimagining the way they're delivering apps to folks. And then we'll always have the personal one-off apps, right? Everybody needs some of those. Again, the device world, again, nothing new here, right? None of this is new. Mobile, PC, laptop, thin clients, we're delivering them all. And a lot of customers are doing all 4 of those. And the demand on IT to get those applications to those folks seamlessly and securely so that it works all the time is pretty high. So simple stuff. Challenges, administrative challenges. We see this every day. I talk to customers all the time that are having these exact problems that we see here. Tool sprawl, it's real. Tool overlap is real. I expect a lot of you on the call today are dealing with these exact issues. One case in point that I think is super interesting over the last year, we've seen a significant uptick in folks taking a bit of a deeper dive into their Microsoft licensing. If I have a tool that's inside my Microsoft suite that I'm already paying for, and I'm paying for another tool that does something very, very similar to that, at what point is the tool in the Microsoft offering, what we would call good enough, right? And there's a lot of cases in there where it absolutely is good enough. It could be Defender, it could be Entra for MFA. So there's a lot of value inside that suite that people are saying, hey, look, I'm paying X amount of dollars for this, but then I'm paying X amount of dollars for that. I have overlap, I have complication that I don't necessarily need. It's complicated for you guys to manage this. So I think that's really come to the forefront over the last year or so. We've helped a lot of customers make better choices there. So we're certainly happy to help in that area. Pace of change, I mean, my God. I'm not sure if I keep losing this or not, so bear with me if I sound like an idiot sometimes. Pace of change, wow. I mean, it's not getting any slower. Again, I'm used, the old IT world was fairly flat. Servers had storage inside them. We didn't have all of these complicated configurations that we have today. And so pace of change is not going away. It's just going to get harder and harder and harder. So what can I do to manage pace of change, to simplify what I'm doing and to get more out of less? Manageability and supportability. I talk to customers often. I talked to a customer the other day that is trying to get their patching under control. Even in 2026, we have customers that still struggle with patching, managing operating systems, patching applications, and managing those application upgrades. All of those things take time. They don't necessarily move the needle for an organization. They're not fun, right? Nobody shows up on a Tuesday morning and says, "Oh my God, let's get some patches rolling, man. This is great." You guys want to do things that help the organization move forward and add value to the organization. And certainly patching, while important from a security perspective, not necessarily something that moves the organization forward. There are better things to be spending your time on. So once we can get those things under control, there's a lot of value there. We talked about locations and device types and job functions, and we'll dig into that a little bit more because I think it's really interesting. Onboarding and offboarding and cleanup and maintenance. Again, a lot of customers that we talk to really struggle with this, right? Sometimes onboarding is easy and offboarding is hard. And cleaning that up and managing the old files and security can be hard. But sometimes onboarding is hard as well. If you have a remote workforce, or you're hiring people that live in other states, or you're using temp workers that live remote from you, right? This can all be very difficult to manage. And so what can we do to make these types of things a little bit easier, right? So again, we'll get through a little bit of that. All right, as I said, what would Bob do? I ask my wife this question all the time. I say, anytime you have a question in life, you should always ask yourself first, what would Bob do? I am a big fan of the old, if you've been around a while, the KISS method, right? Keep it simple, stupid. Big fan. But what matters to users, right? And users are important to me. Like many of you on the call probably, I started on a help desk, worked my way through there. I did a lot of desktop support back in the day when you actually had to go see people and fix their problems at their desk, not remote into the machines or magically fix things remotely, but you had to actually go talk to them and work with them. So I have a lot of compassion and empathy for users and what they deal with on a day-to-day basis, right? A loan officer did not get hired to understand IT. A teller did not get hired to come up with workarounds for how to print, right? They just want stuff to work. They want it to work well. They want it to be very easy, and they want it to work every time they do it, whether they're on a laptop or a phone or a PC, they're in the office, they're at Starbucks, they're at their mother's house, they're in another country, right? They just want it to work. And what matters to IT? I think these are what matter to me. Certainly others may have other opinions, but security, ease of administration, and then as you work up the IT food chain and into management, it's obviously the cost of all of that. Every time I sit down and have conversations with the customers, these are the two things that we try to dive into and understand what matters to IT, what matters to users. If you conquer one without the other, you're probably going to be a little bit unsuccessful, right? And what I have found is the longer most people are in IT and the farther they get away from the end user, I won't say the less they care about the end user, because that's not true. I think they do care, but the less they think about the end user, right? When we're thinking about speeds and feeds and security and all of these things that we have to do to make things successful, sometimes the end user gets kind of lost in the wash, right? It's secure, but we forgot that the end user had to do 9 things to make it work. And a little more painful than it needs to be. So we need to marry the two together. All right, so I love to talk about personas. This is a bit of a new talk track that I think has bubbled to the surface over the last 6 months or so. It's fairly obvious, but I don't think we've talked about it in this way in the past, right? We look at, I think historically we tend to look at users a little myopically. We'll look at them and say, okay, well, everybody gets a virtual app or a virtual desktop, or everybody gets a physical PC or laptop. And as we've moved on to where we are today, that really doesn't work. It's not cost effective and it's not efficient. So what we're trying to do a better job of is look at our users and understand the way our users are different. They use different applications. They have different device requirements. They work from different locations. They have different demands. They may be different kinds of people. They may be temp workers, full-time employees, et cetera, et cetera. And as we look through these users and try to understand what fits, we have to marry this all together. And the cool thing for us, right, as IT folks, is we have a myriad of options today that maybe we didn't have in the past, right? If you go back 5 years, we would be very centric on an approach of something like an application or a desktop virtualization. And that would run in a data center. And we would make that available to folks, whether they were remote or whether they were on site. And the whole conversation would kind of revolve around that idea. We didn't really look at running these resources in the cloud. It's very, very, very expensive. We didn't have AVD or Azure Virtual Desktops necessarily at that time. We didn't have a lot of the hybrid capabilities that we have today. We didn't have ease of use from all the single sign-on capabilities or the security that we have today. So I think as time has gone on and we've been able to look at doing these things different ways, we're starting to look at our users now and find different ways to provide resources to users, right? We're moving into a more SaaS world like we talked about. Secure browsers are now available. Think about your users today. Do you have users? A lot of organizations have users today that only access SaaS-based applications. They still might be doing, their standard Microsoft stuff, right? They might be doing email, they might be doing Word and Excel, and they could be using OneDrive and SharePoint for their data storage, and they use a couple SaaS-based applications, and that's the end of the story. So is there value in giving that person a laptop with Windows 11 and 9 security tools on it to manage it? And oh, by the way, I'm going to patch that all the time. Is that the right way to do it? Or could I maybe give that person a thin client device and put a secure browser on it and call it a day, right? So that's the way we want to start thinking about our users. And if we start looking at them that way, and we look at them from a persona perspective and start understanding that we really have multiple buckets of users that are doing different things from different locations, using different applications at different times, and maybe for different time frames, then we can start to understand how we can break those folks out and be optimal with not just our dollar, but optimal with our administrative overhead, and ideally optimal with the experience that we're delivering to those folks. So a couple quick examples. I threw a couple in here because I thought they were relevant. We spent a lot of time here at Right Systems in healthcare. I would say, from my team anyway, we probably spend more time in the healthcare vertical than we do any of the others, just because there's a pretty high demand for this type of application and desktop virtualization in that arena. So I just threw some examples up here. This isn't an end all be all. This isn't necessarily to take a screenshot of, because this is the end all be all. What I wanted to do is ideally show you here 4 different people that work for the same organization, that have different purposes, different jobs, that could do things in 4 different, I don't know if your guys' screen is flickering, but mine is, so bear with me again while I sound like an idiot. But they're doing different jobs from different locations, likely from different devices. I think it's interesting to understand that we can deliver these different solutions to different folks, right? Only one of these potential solutions did we list as a Windows 11 user that we would support, a device that we would support and patch and put security on, right? Thin client devices, secure by nature, secure out of the box. BYOD, right? A different kind of security. A little bit of Azure Virtual Desktop, perhaps some secure browser, and some Windows 365, right? Some cloud PCs that are instantaneous to spin up and incredibly easy to manage with Intune. So that's a healthcare example. I think I threw another one in here. Manufacturing, again, it's the exact same idea, right? I have 4 different people doing 4 different jobs. You'll see I put them together pretty much the same. Windows 11, a thin client, maybe a thin client or BYOD, and then certainly a BYOD again, right? So the idea is the same. Delivering different solutions to different folks based on what they're doing and where they're accessing from and those types of things. So real world examples. I like to talk about what we do sometimes. I didn't throw any names in here. We'll keep it simple, but these are real world. All of these projects are, let me look, getting ready to start, underway in the pre-sales phase. So these are real world examples of customers that we are working with today. So we have a customer that has a Nutanix footprint today, and they would like to expand into AVD, but they would like to do some of that AVD on the Nutanix platform using AHV as the hypervisor. Cool deal, that is available. It's been available for a couple months. It's very, very new, but it's very exciting. And they're looking for a 3-prong approach as they move away from maybe a standard traditional way of doing virtualization. What they're trying to do here is, again, get the right resources to the right people at the right time. So if I have a lot of folks that are maybe offshore or temporary workers, they're great for a Windows 365 solution. If I have some folks that are only doing SaaS-based applications, again, great for a browser-based solution, where I can secure that that connection, right? And I can be concerned and block things like, you know, malware and those types of things. And then AVD, if I still have client-server apps, which I certainly do, AVD is a great tool to deliver those. I have another customer that is in the process right now of doing a pilot with Citrix and AVD. It's an on-prem solution today. This specific customer is using some GPUs. If you've ever looked at doing GPUs, they're very, very expensive. If you've looked at the way hardware is today, as Tony alluded to on the last week's call, it's very, very expensive. It continues to go up. And so this customer is also growing very quickly through M&A. And so they're looking for a solution that makes sense from a cost perspective as it compares to the outlay of cash to acquire the hardware. And they're also looking for something that allows for rapid growth, again, as they work through M&A with multiple new folks that they're bringing on board. We have a financial customer that's moving from Citrix to AVD plus Nerdio. They're looking to streamline the cost and simplify the management. So they're moving from an on-prem solution to an AVD-based solution. Again, they're going to stick with Citrix. It makes sense. Or excuse me, they're going to move to Nerdio. Excuse me. We think we're still in the pre-sales phase there, but we think that's a Nerdio opportunity for them. And we'll talk a little bit about Nerdio here in a few minutes with Chad and the value that they bring on top of an AVD solution. And then we have another one that I think is pretty interesting where we're working with a government customer that is, like we talked about, onboarding temporary employees that are in other parts of the country. Today, they image a laptop and they ship a laptop to a person. But if we could do BYO, give them instant access to a Windows 365 or an AVD solution, then that would be quicker to onboard, better for the end user, and then obviously quicker to offboard as well. Okay, so I said Nerdio a little bit. I'm going to turn, oh man, you guys can't read that, can you?
No, just keep hit it again, Bob, and it'll fill in.
Oh, look at that! It's like magic. Thanks, Chad. It looked good on my laptop.
No worries, no worries.
So I'm going to turn this over to Chad. Chad Frisk is on with us today. He is our partner manager with Nerdio. We've been partnered with Nerdio for about probably 5 years now. And I wanted Chad to come in. I gave Chad very specific kind of what I wanted to talk about today. We're talking a little bit about Azure Virtual Desktops today. And we're talking about Windows 365 today. You heard me talk a little bit about, you can call it Azure Local, you can call it running AVD on-prem, like we talked about with Nutanix and HV. And we mentioned Intune for a little bit. And I asked Chad to come in and talk about the value of Nerdio, the value add that Nerdio brings on top of Azure Virtual Desktops and Windows 365. So pretty straightforward. Chad, are you good?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
I got you.
All right. So a lot of what Bob and I think even Tony was talking about last week is really just the transformation that's happening in the market. Hardware, obviously, costs are going up. They're not going to go down anytime soon. AI and the forces that are happening in the market are just driving the costs up on, and even the access to the hardware. A lot of where we come in, Nerdio has been around for about 10 years now. And we've been very aligned to Microsoft. We're a pure play with Microsoft. We have worked alongside their team around end user computing for 10 years now. Really what it comes down to is delivering a management system for delivering Windows cloud experiences. So whether that be from the cloud using AVD or Windows 365 or even on-premise, as Bob alluded to with Azure Virtual Desktops on-premise or hybrid. In addition to that, also layering some tooling over for Microsoft Intune. And you might ask, okay, well, that sounds great, but what does that actually do? The unified management system is really designed to minimize costs. It's really designed to accelerate your deployment, reduce the overall complexity of the environment, and really streamline how you're going to manage all those assets. You might see an organization that might do one or the other, but most of the time you're going to see organizations that do a little bit of all of it. And really what Nerdio is designed to do is to layer over that Azure tenant and really streamline and make things less complicated, make things more cost effective, and reduce the number of staff, the number of power, or the amount of power you're going to use for managing that environment. In the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the issues we have with native tooling. So if you've got an E3 or an E5, or maybe you've decided to go E7, you do have the assets to look at some of these tools. What you're going to realize, though, is that there's challenges with those native tools. They're fragmented, it's complex, it's manual, it's not very great about cost management. There's limited management around your host pools as well as your images. There's really no analytics, there's no monitoring. There's also security gaps in access, creating access complexity. And there's also lack of being able to see your scaling and your performance overall. So a lot of what we do is we layer over that. We give you, and I know this is thrown around quite a bit, but we give you that single place or that single pane of glass that's going to layer over and give you the tools in one location. It's going to reduce the time to handle all of it. We have kind of I guess a rule that we believe in 3 clicks or less. So when you're spinning up an image or you're maintaining an image or whatever you're dealing with, it's really 3 clicks or less to get to where you need to go. So it reduces the time, the click rate, and everything else. You also have the ability to see what your host pools are costing you. You can do this by department. You can do it by machine. So you have the ability to run reports on that. You also have the ability to manage your host pools. You also have the ability to reduce, in a virtualized world, you're going to have 90% of your day is going to be dealing with broken hosts, having to recreate an image, having to blow it away, having to restart it. We do all of that. We automate all that. We also have the ability to increase security through hardened images. You can bring your hardened image. You can also use a CIS hardened image to improve your security throughout the environment. And then we also have the ability to look at auto scaling, see what's under provisioned, see what's over provisioned, tighten that up so we can reduce the costs that you're spending on those images. We also have the ability to spin up machines when your workforce comes in and really need them. So for example, you might have folks that'll come in at 9 o'clock, maybe another tranche of people come in at noon. We don't turn all the machines on at 8 o'clock to then, of course, increase the power and the consumption and everything else that would be associated with that environment. We turn it on when people need it. And likewise, when they leave, we turn those machines off. So again, there's a lot of downturn on the compute, as well as power, as well as the storage. So there's a number of ways that we're automating that process to give you upwards of 50 to 60% in savings. Now, likewise, on your Intune, if you could hit the next slide for me, Bob. Majority of customers in the market are using Intune, and most of what we hear in the market is that it is very difficult to manage. It's all over the place. If I have a very large estate, and this is physical endpoints all the way down to virtual endpoints, it doesn't matter to us, but you're going to find that you don't have a lot of visibility like with AVD. You have compliance blind spot, policy conflicts that you're not going to be able to see. You're going to have bottlenecks. You're going to have a number of things that don't necessarily make using Intune natively easy. So a lot of where we add in, very similar to AVD, with Intune, we layer in things that will help with policy conflict, will help with remote support, in that we'll give you the ability to remote into a device, be able to make changes with no distraction, no interruption to the user. You can even use that to do session recording. We also give you the ability to reduce the tools that you have, like TeamViewer. You don't need that. That's also part of with the licensing for Intune, or Nerdio Manager for Intune, that comes complete with that. We also have the ability to give you visibility around policies. So if you have a conflict with policy, you get policy A, policy B, you can see where the conflict is, and we will make suggestions to you to fix or rectify that situation. We also have the ability to put restore points into your Intune policies. Natively, that's not available. In addition to that, you have the ability to see any number of issues within the environment, which strengthens things throughout the use of the tool. Again, you can also, just like with AVD, you can also look at cost attribution with your department, or you can look at a per user cost. You also have the ability to see things like apps that are not being utilized. So it also gives you the ability to tighten things up. Lastly, but I think is important to say, the system learns how your environment runs. And once it learns your environment, it will make ongoing suggestions to you to tighten things up from a cost standpoint, but also on a management standpoint. So again, it starts to learn and starts to make really strong suggestions to improve the overall experience. Overall, we would love to have a conversation with you. If you've ever had a discussion internally around transformation and how you're really delivering out workloads around end user computing, if you've dabbled with AVD or you've looked at Windows 365, or you just really like to understand how would this look or feel in my environment, we'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you and Right Systems and just answer any questions you might have. With that, that's really all I have. But Bob, I wanted to say thank you for having us on today. It was a pleasure getting to tell a little bit more about our story.
Cool, thanks, Chad. So let me make sure I understand this, Chad. A few minutes ago, I talked about what matters to administrators, and I said manageability, I said security,
yes,
and I said the almighty dollar.
Yes.
I thought you covered all three of those.
Yes.
Very well. Okay, excellent. And that is exactly why we're partnered with Nerdio. All three of those matter to administrators, and I think as Chad outlined, and certainly we can get deeper into this, they check all the boxes. So very awesome. Okay, Chad, thank you. Chad, if you could, if you're okay staying with us in case there's any questions for you near the end.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll be here.
Right on, man. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna flip now and give you a couple minutes with Chris Myrick. Chris manages our service desk. Yes, but critical to Right Systems. Chris is really the manager of our managed services practice on the engineering side. He's doing all of the pre-sales and contracts, and he's talking to customers every day about what matters. And I felt if you were in the webinar with Tony last week, and if you're hearing what we're talking about today, what we often talk about with you guys is it's often new technology, right? It's things that maybe you guys haven't seen before, haven't done before. You're wearing a lot of hats. Everybody's busy. I've yet to go into an organization where people have their feet kicked up and they're drinking coffee and shooting the breeze for 6 hours a day. The reality is everybody's got too much work to do, and everybody's really, really, really busy. And so what Chris and I like to talk about is we like to talk about where can we help? Where can we take things off of the plate of our customers to just give them a little bit of breath, give them a little bit of help, and make life a little bit easier. And what Chris and I often talk about around that is what I like to say is I call it point solutions, right? There's value that we can bring to an organization from a managed services perspective that allow us to kind of take some of those things off your plate, and again, let you get back to the business of what the organization really needs you to accomplish to move the organization forward. So Chris, without further ado, over to you. If you could give me a couple minutes on maybe what you want to talk about today.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you guys for having me here today to speak with you all. I see some familiar names. So yeah, very good to be here. So, managed services, right? We wear lots of hats. We're here to support your IT team. And, some of the things that we do, right? So we're here to help reduce operational drag. And what I mean by that is that we can help shift routine monitoring, patching, ticket triage, escalation, and preventative maintenance to a managed support model so that your internal IT teams can focus on higher value priorities, right? We hear on a regular basis that, the people want their IT team focused on the things that move the business forward. They're not necessarily, do they want them focused on managing the backups and antivirus and all of the cloud solutions? And, maybe, but oftentimes we find that those activities often get in the way of moving the business forward. So we can help there. We also help to improve visibility and control. Cloud cost control. And control. So we use reporting, monitoring, alerting, root cause analysis. We meet with our customers for QBRs quarterly to make sure that your environments are easier to govern and that you have a good roadmap as you transition to cloud platforms. We also help optimize spend and not just infrastructure. So cloud cost control is tied to a few things, right? Licensing, consumption, support effort, and ideally avoiding reactive project work. We're not just moving servers out of the data center. So our MSP team can assist you in that journey. We also add specialty without adding headcount. So with our co-managed services, we give customers access to tiered support and subject matter expertise across Workspace, cloud, security, network, data center, all across the board, right? We have specialty engineers on our team that can assist with some of the more advanced technologies that we're talking about. We're talking about when moving out of the data center, right, you may not have a team of people that know Azure right away, right? So the value and benefit to our managed services team is that we can work side by side with your IT team to not only keep the environment updated and to best practices, but also to help your IT team along the way to understand the product and the things that are deployed in the environment in a true co-managed environment. And then we also help strengthen security and resilience. So we standardize around cloud forward operations like Microsoft 365 administration, Intune, Defender for Endpoint, Exchange Online Protection, backup validation, and patch management. What I don't want managed services to sound like is just outsourced help desk, because it's so much more than that, especially in the context of getting out of the data center. The value is way bigger. So when we see organizations move their workloads, their endpoints, identity, security, collaboration services into cloud platforms, it doesn't eliminate the operational responsibility, right? It's redistributed. So someone still has to monitor the health, manage changes, patch systems, review alerts, validate backups, handle escalations, optimize licensing, and keep the environment aligned to business risks. So that's how the managed services team could assist. For the IT audience here, right, managed services gives you operational leverage. It helps reduce the noise and routine work that helps keep your team reactive. It also gives you access to a broader bench of engineering resources when issues move beyond kind of your tier 1, tier 2 support needs. And then for the financial audience, this is the way that we can help is around providing some predictability and risk reduction. So instead of hiring for every specialty or funding a new tool independently or waiting for aging infrastructure to force decisions, managed services can help create a more controlled operating model. So the return is not just fewer servers in a data center. It's better visibility, better governance, fewer surprises, and a support structure that will scale with you as a business. So as you grow, we can help grow with you and support that growth.
Outstanding.
Thanks. And then I guess bottom line. No, you're good. Cloud changes the platform. Managed services, we help make it sustainable.
Outstanding. Chris, thank you. So the goal of having Chris come on, guys, today was just to get a little bit of exposure to everybody. If you haven't been exposed to the right systems managed services practice, It's pretty amazing what those guys are doing. Everything Chris said is spot on. So again, just a little bit of exposure today, so you guys see what they're doing. And everything we've talked about last week, everything we've talked about this week, it all falls under stuff that Chris and his team are more than capable of handling with you. Okay, so now what? So I think, the goal today was not to make everybody walk out of here smarter. It wasn't necessarily to educate everybody. What I really was hoping to accomplish today was to just get everybody to think a little bit about kind of what you're doing. Go back and look at maybe the way you're delivering apps and you're delivering desktops and the administrative overhead to those solutions and the tool sprawl and the end user experience that you have, right? Again, I feel sometimes like on the end user side, we are sometimes the low man on the totem pole when it comes to thoughts and spending, right? There's a lot of things that are above the end user experience and for very valid reasons, right? Security and all of those other things that are very important to an organization. But don't lose sight of the end users. Don't lose sight of how important they are to the business. I always say that the person at the other end of the keyboard is the person making your company money. So paying attention to those people is important. So I think it's good to go back and take a look at this. Think about personas a little bit. Think about profiles and how that would map out in your particular organization. We're happy to come in and help do this. We're happy to come in and give you some analysis of this. These are things that we do through a pre-sales engagement just to help you kind of get started and get moving down the road and see where it goes from there. That was the goal today. Let me give you, there's one more session in the webinar series. I'm actually pretty excited about the next session. Again, it's next Wednesday. Colin is going to be delivering that session, and he's going to talk a lot about Microsoft licensing and where Microsoft is today. And he's going to talk about the offerings and what's available and what you have inside those suites and the value that you can get out of those tools. He's going to talk a little bit about Right Systems as a CSP and the partnership we have with Microsoft and with TD Synnex and the value add that we have around working with a CSP for your Microsoft relationship. I think it's going to be pretty cool. I asked him to talk a little bit about the new Flex licensing and the licensing that's available for Windows 365. I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's going to move the needle for Windows 365 as organizations are looking at maybe how that compares to AVD, pros and cons. What they cost, how easy they are to manage, and et cetera, right? So I think there's some cool stuff that Colin's going to talk about next week around that. And then following next week's webinar, again, that's the last one, right? So Tony talked about data center and cloud last week. We're talking a little bit of Workspace today, and then we'll talk a little Microsoft licensing and that kind of stuff next week. Following that, we are here to help. I would encourage you to continue to reach out to your account manager if you want me to come in, if you want Tony to come in and have deeper conversations about this. We're here to help. It's just fun stuff to talk about. So that's what I had. I'm gonna flip over and ask the marketing team, who thank you, by the way, for all of your support getting the webinar up and running. Anything that anybody wants to talk about, any questions that are on the board, anything else before we get out of here?
If anyone would like to ask any questions, please just drop them in the chat and we can discuss those.
And if you don't, that's okay. Please email me. Let me know what's going on. Any questions you might have, happy to answer. Happy to direct you in the right way. So, okay, Grace, are we cool?
We currently don't have any questions in the chat, so I think we can go ahead and wrap up if no one else has any questions. So
okay.
We can maybe wait just a few more seconds.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question.
Sure.
Questions from Brad Teed. What's the most common mistake organizations make when consolidating endpoint management tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. Chris might help me out on this one a little bit as well. He spends as much time in this arena as I do. But I think one big challenge that organizations have, and I think maybe this comes not at the technical level, but maybe at the management level, is thinking that all tools are created equal. I've been guilty of this myself. I've gone to Chris or somebody else in the organization and said, hey, why can't we just get rid of that tool that this customer has and put them on maybe this tool over here that's inside their their suite of offerings from Microsoft? And I will get told, well, because the tool that they own does A, B, and C, and the tool that Microsoft has only does A and B. And so maybe it doesn't meet the needs of the organization, right? Maybe there's some missing security feature functionality, or maybe it's not automated as easily as the tool that they're using, something like that. So I think maybe trying to replace tools with cheaper tools or free tools because they are cheaper or free, that's the biggest one that I see. Chris, do you see anything different than that?
Yeah, that's a big one. The other thing that I see, we live in an age of integrations. We want things to integrate and work well together. So oftentimes when you're looking at replacing tools, you want to make sure that they can talk to each other or talk to a centralized plane. So oftentimes we see, where customers will get a product or a couple products and they don't really work well together. They don't talk, and it creates more manual work on the back end. So something where it may have seen, it looks more cost effective on face value, but then you get into the, the integration of the management of how it actually works, and you find out, what, these things don't talk well, and now I have a bunch of manual overhead to, whatever, maybe it's reporting each month that has to be done manually because you can't get the two products to work. So,
yeah,
but I would agree mostly with what Bob said. Yeah, around.
Good point. So I think another on that subject, Chris, I think you see the same thing I do. What we're seeing is more platform plays from our vendors. A lot of the vendors these days that maybe do one or two things pretty well are trying to now do 3 or 4 or 5 things pretty well. There's certainly value in that, to Chris's point, that if you have a vendor that has a suite of tools that does 3 or 4 things that you need to get done, they're probably going to play pretty well together, right? But the flip side of that is just because I'm good at 1 or 2 things doesn't mean the other things that I'm offering in a suite are necessarily as good as the other things I'm offering, right? So it's balancing. It's balancing all of that: the cost versus a suite of tools that plays together versus the feature functionality that you might need. So yeah, that's good.
Awesome.
Grace.
Well, those are all the questions that we have. If anyone has any more questions, just put them in the chat real quick. But I think we're good to wrap up.
Awesome. Everybody, thanks again for taking the time. Please reach out. Anything you need, here to help. All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks, guys.